Okay, does this work? Yes, this works, yay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I was actually paying so close attention to the keynote that it wasn't until 10 minutes before 10 that I noticed what time it was and thought, boy, I'd better hustle. So I apologize that I'm running a couple of minutes late. My name is Paul Robichaux. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management at Quest. And what I'm here to talk about today is teams. More specifically, 7 timely tips, which is a terrible marketing phrase, for how you can make teams more useful for your end users. Now, I only have about 10 minutes to get through 20 slides, so I'm going to talk fast, but the slides will be available for download later, and I'll skip over the filler. So let's start with the simple question of, is Teams easy for you and for your users? No, it's not. We tend to think it is because we've been forced into using Teams very rapidly over the last 18 months or so. But the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of things in Teams that make it needlessly complicated for you and needlessly complicated for your users. The biggest one, oh, wait a minute, I just see that something horrible is happening here. Okay, that's better. So the biggest takeaway here, we all had to start using Teams very rapidly, whether we wanted to or not. And since then, in some ways, Teams has become the centerpiece of a lot of our work lives. Day to day, you all use Teams, your users all use Teams, but many times users are forced into using Teams without a real appreciation or understanding of all the things that they can do with it. And because of that, it's difficult for them to get good value, and they generate a lot of what I casually refer to as flapping or noise. Because when they don't understand how to do things, either they won't do them or they'll do them wrong. And many of the things people can do wrong in Teams, like putting data where it doesn't belong, means that there's cleanup work for the administrators and managers later on. The other thing is, if you are at all involved in supporting end users, very quickly you find these last 2 questions can burn up an infinite amount of your time. Because when one user has a question and learns that it's okay to call you, they will, and then they'll tell their mates, oh yeah, well the last time I had a question, I just asked Paul and he told me. And that second person will tell 2 more people, and the next thing you know, literally your entire day is consumed with people asking you things like, well, how do I create a new channel? That's not super helpful. So if you want to make Teams easier for users, there's some specific things that you could do. One is to, both for you and your users, help shrink down the number of interruptions that people have to face. One is to better manage risk at an organizational level, right? Because remember that risk is the product of 2 things that are multiplied together. The possibility that something bad will happen, and then the expected damage or expected impact if that bad thing does happen. If you reduce either of those numbers, you reduce the overall risk. Adding more security or the more appropriate, better security can make things easier for you. And then finally, making sure that you have support for the kinds of things that are difficult to do in Teams around mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, tenant-to-tenant motions is important. So why is this important? I'll summarize this slide by saying as Teams becomes more critical, the data in it and access to it become more critical. So I promised 7 tips, and I'm going to start with a really simple one. How many of you have got users who are using AirPods with Teams? Okay, just no. It's expensive, well, it's potentially expensive. It can cost you some money to give every user a certified device, but the reduction in support costs and the improvement in user satisfaction will be worth it, I promise. You can go out and get a good quality, basic, wired, Teams certified headset for 20 quid. Do it. Everybody will be happier once you do. The other thing is you get a wealth of call quality data in Teams that you can use to identify the root cause behind problems. The call quality dashboard is very useful and it doesn't cost anything. The real-time call data that's available in the Teams client can be very useful and doesn't cost anything. Now, with that said, there are a whole bunch of other vendors here who will sell you more detailed solutions to help you figure out exactly why this particular call failed at that particular time. And if you need that, there are solutions that will help you, but you can go a long way toward improving the experience and reducing the number of times that people ask you stupid questions about their call quality by ensuring that the quality is better to start with. Next, teach people how to share. Okay, emailing attachments, that's the devil's work. Don't do it, don't allow it, don't pretend you don't see it when other people do it. Teams has got so many better tools for sharing attachment data, right? The ability for me to take a document and put it in a Teams channel and let multiple other people edit it and review it and comment on it at the same time is just brilliant. That would have been science fiction 15 years ago. And it's free, and everybody can do it. So if your users aren't doing it, either it's because they don't want to, in which case they're wrong, and you need to help them understand why, or they don't know how, in which case you need to show them how or teach them how. Okay, this teach, encourage, and model, you're going to hear this over and over again from people who specialize in end-user adoption. You will also hear it over and over again from kindergarten teachers, and that's not a coincidence. Okay? You have to teach people to do what you want them to do. You have to encourage them to keep doing it even if it's unfamiliar or difficult, but you also have to model the behavior that you want yourself. Teams has got a lot of tools that you can use, and the M365 ecosystem overall has tools that you can use to see what are people sharing, who are they sharing it with, how often are they sharing, are there guests? We have private channels, we'll soon have shared channels. We'll have the fluid components in Teams, which are just brilliant if you haven't had a chance to play with those. My point is that we have this big toolbox of different things we can use to make sharing better. So help your users know what's in the toolbox and know how to approve them. Next, good table manners. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I know there are people who can hear my voice right now who will send a Teams message to say, hey, did you get my email yet? Okay, people do that. Or, my favorite, the people who will send you a single Teams message that says, hi, and then wait for you to answer. Now the problem with that is, I might be on an airplane. I might be at a cricket stadium in the UK. If you just send me that message and I don't know what you want or how important it is, I'm probably not going to fall all over myself to answer it. Okay, and if you're an IT leader or an IT operator, you're going to have exactly the same problem. So the first thing I would encourage you to do the minute you get back to work, send people this link. It explains why instead of just saying hi or hello, it's not rude, it's not impolite, it's not bad to make your Teams message tell people what it is you want. Totally fine to say hi, hope you had a good weekend, and then follow it in the same message with, I was wondering if you had 10 minutes to talk about X, or I was wondering if you had had a chance to look at Y. Tell people what you want. Keep in mind, this is not always going to be synchronous. Just because you send a Teams message, just because the person on the other end shows a status of available, it does not mean that they're sitting at their computer staring at the screen waiting for your message. Very important to keep that in mind. The last other thing I will leave with you here, when someone likes a message, learn to treat that as not, yes, I like this message, it is awesome, I wish I had thought of it. It just means, yes, I saw it. Okay? The reason for that is that as you teach and encourage and model that particular behavior, it gives you a way to understand when people are acknowledging, yes, I saw that thing, which means you never have to ask them, did you see that thing? Okay, I promise it'll make everybody's life better if you're able to do that. Okay, understanding hotspots and pinch points. So this comes from the manufacturing world, where anytime there's a chance that a machine might grab you by the shirt and pull you in, or grab your necktie or your jewelry or your fingers, there will be signs warning you. For your users, there are going to be things that will pinch them, that are uncomfortable or unpleasant or don't work the way that they want. And you can help make the pinching less bad if you understand what they're doing with Teams and how they're doing it. So what this really boils down to is 4 things. One is using the reporting tools built into Teams and subliminal message, we make reporting tools too. But using those tools to see what are users actually doing. How often are they using Teams? Are they mostly using chat? Are they mostly using meetings? Once you understand that, you'll get a better feel for the things that people aren't doing, and then you can start to ask the questions through surveys, focus groups, guided discussions, casual discussions if you're in the office around, hey, I notice your department is not using Teams video meetings. Do you mind, can we talk about that? Why is that? It might be as simple as, well, the only cameras we have are these crap cameras that are in our laptops, and they look up our noses because of the desktop angle, and we don't like that. Or it could be something much richer, but the point is you won't know, and you can't relieve the pain for the user until you ask those questions, and asking the questions depends on the data. Telling people to do things without the data first is just shouting at them, right? That's all it is. It's exactly like if any of you have teenage children, shouting at them to take out the garbage or you clean up their room or whatever, and it's going to get exactly the same results and generate the same kind of climate that you get when you yell at a teenager. So my takeaway here, part of your job should always be asking, why are things the way they are? And what can I do to make them the way that I want them to be? Okay? If you can generalize that principle and go beyond Teams to other aspects of your job, then hey, so much the better. All right, I mentioned how we calculate risk. And I've been thinking about this a lot because an increasing percentage of my job time is spent on doing cyber resilience, building tools for ransomware recovery, other things that don't have anything to do with Teams. But when you look at the kinds of problems people are worried about versus the kinds of problems they actually have, there's a big gap. How many of you, when you go to the beach here in the UK, are worried that you'll be attacked by a shark? All right, you proved my point very nicely. I get a very different answer when I ask that question in the United States. Because in the US, there are sharks, but in the US media, there's this continual, sharks are bad. If you go to the beach, a shark will eat you. Drumbeat narrative. We have Shark Week. We have, every time there's a news story about someone being attacked, it's very prominent. And yet, you're at a much bigger risk of drowning because you go swimming in surf conditions that you're not competent to handle, but you don't see Riptide Week on the Discovery Channel. So the perceived risk and the actual risk are miles apart. What I would like to encourage you all to do is to be honest about categorizing where the real risks in your organization are. The biggest risk most of you probably face is that someone will do something stupid. KPMG is a great example. They deleted every single one of their Teams chat messages because someone put a retention policy in place without testing it first. Okay? Great example. Nobody planned that. That poor administrator didn't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, today I'm just going to burn it all down. But that's what happened. So if you think about the risks in your particular organization based on what you do, where you do it, who your customers are, what your level of operational maturity is like, what the level of your staff knowledge and maturity are like, then you could start having some very honest conversations about how to protect yourself. Even though I work for a vendor that makes security software, I'll be the first person to tell you the solution is not always going to be to go out and buy the latest security product. Sometimes it is, but more often, if you don't fix the fundamentals in your own organizational culture and operational culture, then a better tool isn't going to help you. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. One of the things Microsoft has done really well with Teams is they built this huge scale of application that's gone from a few 100,000 users to hundreds of millions of users very rapidly. None of us scale that way. So even if you only have a user base of 20 users, and each one of those users asks you 2 questions a day. Okay, think about that for a second. That's 40 questions a day. And let's charitably assume that you can answer each of those questions and handle the whole interaction in 90 seconds. That's an hour of your workday. Every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, every Friday, probably on the weekends, and then repeat the next week. An hour a day, that's 12.5% of your work week. Okay, so think about that for a second. Nobody wants that. The only way you can escape that, well, there are two ways. You can tell people to piss off every time they ask you a question. That will make you unpopular, but it will protect your time. Or you can diversify or push that workload out by giving people tools to teach themselves and by finding other people in the organization who are happy to help you teaching. So find the champions in your organization who are able and willing to teach others. Work with them to teach them to fish, and let them catch the fish and feed them to people. Finally, if you only learn one thing here today, learn how to use quiet hours notification policies in Teams. It will make your life immensely better. As soon as you've learned that, start teaching people how to do it. Because the number one problem with Teams is the number one benefit of Teams. Anybody can reach out to anybody at any time. And so people do. And so if you are, as an example, using Teams on WebEx to present to a customer and you didn't turn your Teams status to Do Not Disturb, Teams doesn't know when you're in WebEx presentation mode, and your Teams messages will happily pop up in the corner. So if your boss is sending you a message saying, Paul, you're a total knob, why did you say this or why did you do that? It'll show up during your customer call. Ask me how I know. Okay, again, use the tools that Microsoft provides to minimize the interruptions that you run into. And then for your master's level in that, learn to help your users help you by minimizing their opportunities to interrupt you. I mentioned that before. If they know the answer, they won't ask you for the question. Right? If you can do that, that will turn down the number of interruptions you have. If you proactively tell people when you know that there's something wrong or broken in the service or in your environment, then people won't have to come ask you, oh, I can't log in, what's wrong? Well, I sent an email an hour ago saying that there was an outage with Azure AD. Okay? This is very much a case where you can help yourself first and then help others. So Quest sells a lot of stuff. You can come see my colleague Chris or anybody in our booth if you want to know more, or come find me and I'm happy to talk about it. But that's actually not too bad because I started 7 minutes late and I'm only 4 minutes late now. So I'm going to take that as a win. And I'll be happy to stick around if any of you have questions. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of the day.